On the first day of January 2020, a quiet morning in Badger, Minnesota ended in violence. Angela Wynn, 51 years old, was shot and killed. The weapon was a shotgun. The person responsible was Angelo Oluf Borreson, a 56-year-old man she knew. Badger is a small community in Roseau County, located in the far northern reaches of Minnesota near the Canadian border. The landscape is flat and open, shaped by harsh winters and long stretches of farmland. Winter in this part of the country is unforgiving. Temperatures drop well below zero. Snow blankets the ground for months at a time. The wind cuts across the open fields with a sharpness that penetrates even the thickest clothing. Communities here are tight-knit, where everyone knows everyone, and where news travels quickly. The arrival of law enforcement on that January morning sent shockwaves through the town. Badger itself is small, with a population that barely reaches into the hundreds. Main Street consists of a handful of businesses, a post office, and a few scattered homes. Life moves slowly here. People know their neighbors not just by name, but by family history, by occupation, by the struggles and triumphs that mark rural existence. It is the kind of place where a tragedy does not remain private for long. By the time the sun had fully risen on January 1st, 2020, word of Angela Wynn's death had begun to spread. Angela Wynn had lived a quiet life in this rural corner of the state. At 51, she was known to those around her as a woman who kept to herself but maintained friendly connections within the community. She was not someone who sought attention or conflict. Her days were routine, shaped by the rhythms of small-town life. She had friends. She had acquaintances. She had a history in Badger that stretched back years. Those who knew her described her as someone who valued her privacy but was never unkind. She was part of the fabric of the community, one thread among many that held the town together. Her relationship with Angelo Oluf Borreson was one of acquaintance. They were not strangers, but neither were they close. The nature of their connection remains unclear, though it was enough to bring them into contact on that fateful day. In small towns like Badger, relationships often overlap in unexpected ways. People cross paths at the grocery store, at church, at community events. They share mutual friends. They encounter each other in ways that are unavoidable. Angela and Angelo had such a connection, one that existed on the periphery of daily life but had become increasingly strained. Angelo Oluf Borreson was 56 years old at the time of the shooting. Details about his occupation and personal life remain sparse. Public records offer little insight into how he spent his days or what shaped his character. What is known is that he and Angela Wynn had a history, one marked by conflict. In the time leading up to the shooting, tensions between them had escalated. There had been incidents in the past. Angela had allegedly assaulted him on previous occasions. The exact circumstances of these encounters are not fully documented, but they suggest a pattern of hostility and unresolved grievances. The nature of these past confrontations is difficult to piece together. What constitutes assault in the context of a small-town dispute can vary widely. Was it a physical altercation? A heated argument that turned violent? A misunderstanding that spiraled out of control? The details remain murky. What is clear is that both Angela and Angelo carried wounds from their interactions. Wounds that were not physical but emotional, rooted in anger and resentment that had been allowed to fester. The weeks and months before January 1st, 2020 were marked by what would later be described as bad blood. The relationship between Angela Wynn and Angelo Oluf Borreson had deteriorated. Whatever bond or understanding had existed between them had frayed. There were arguments, there were confrontations. The details of these disputes remain largely private, known only to those directly involved. But the outcome of this discord would prove irreversible. In small communities, conflicts rarely remain hidden. Neighbors notice when voices are raised. Friends observe when someone is troubled or angry. It is likely that people in Badger were aware of the tension between Angela and Angelo, even if they did not know the full extent of it. Perhaps they dismissed it as a personal matter, something that the two individuals would resolve on their own. Perhaps they assumed it was not serious enough to warrant intervention. Whatever the case, the warnings were there, subtle and unspoken, waiting for someone to act. On the morning of January 1st, 2020, Angelo Oluf Borreson made a decision. He retrieved a shotgun. He went to the location where Angela Wynn was present. What words were exchanged, if any, in those final moments is unknown. What followed was a single act of violence. The shotgun was fired. Angela Wynn was struck. She did not survive. The sound of a gunshot in a quiet town carries far. It echoes across empty streets and open fields. It penetrates walls and windows. It shatters the stillness of a winter morning. For those who heard it, the noise was unmistakable. It was not the crack of ice breaking on a frozen lake or the backfire of an old truck. It was the sound of violence, sudden and final. The response was immediate. Law enforcement arrived at the scene shortly after the shooting. Angelo Oluf Borreson did not flee. He was taken into custody without incident. The investigation began quickly, with officers working to piece together the events that had led to Angela Wynn's death. The weapon was recovered. Witnesses were interviewed. The history between the two individuals was examined. The scene itself told part of the story. The shotgun lay nearby, its purpose fulfilled. Angela Wynn's body remained where she had fallen, a stark reminder of the finality of the act. Officers moved carefully through the space, documenting everything, searching for evidence that might explain what had happened. But in cases like this, the physical evidence often tells only a fraction of the story. The real answers lie in the history between two people, in the words spoken and unspoken, in the grievances that built over time until they became unbearable. In the days following the shooting, Angelo Oluf Borreson was formally charged. The legal process moved forward, though slowly. The case was classified as pending, awaiting trial and resolution. The community of Badger, still reeling from the loss, watched as the justice system began its work. There were questions, there were demands for answers. But above all, there was grief, a deep and abiding sadness that one of their own had been taken in such a violent and senseless way. Angela Wynn's death left a void in the lives of those who knew her. She was a woman who had lived quietly, without seeking attention or conflict. Her final moments were marked by violence she could not escape. The reasons behind Angelo Oluf Borreson's actions remain rooted in the unresolved tensions that had built between them over time. The history of alleged assaults, the bad blood that had festered, all culminated in a single morning that ended a life. For the people of Badger, the loss was personal. Angela was not just a name in a news report. She was a neighbor, a friend, a familiar face. Her death forced the community to confront uncomfortable truths about conflict and violence, about the dangers of allowing tensions to go unaddressed. It raised questions about whether more could have been done, whether someone could have intervened, whether Angela Wynn's life could have been saved. The case of Angela Wynn is a reminder of how quickly conflict can escalate. What begins as disagreement or tension can transform into something far more dangerous. In small communities like Badger, where lives are intertwined and relationships are unavoidable, the consequences of unresolved hostility can be devastating. Angela Wynn's death stands as a stark example of this reality. As winter continued to grip Roseau County, life in Badger moved forward, though forever changed. The legal proceedings against Angelo Oluf Borreson continued, winding their way through the court system. Each hearing, each motion, each delay served as a reminder of what had been lost. For Angela's friends and family, the wait for justice was long and painful. They wanted answers. They wanted accountability. Most of all, they wanted to ensure that Angela's death was not forgotten, that her life meant something beyond the tragedy of its ending. The details of the case, sparse as they are, paint a picture of two people caught in a cycle of conflict they could not break. Angelo Oluf Borreson, whether driven by anger, fear, or something else entirely, chose violence as his solution. Angela Wynn, whatever her role in the tensions between them, did not deserve to die. Her death was not inevitable. It was the result of choices made, of opportunities missed, of a system and a community that did not or could not intervene in time. As the legal proceedings continue, the memory of Angela Wynn remains with those who knew her. Her life, though ended too soon, is not forgotten. The events of January 1st, 2020 serve as a somber chapter in the history of Badger, Minnesota, a day that began like any other but ended in tragedy. The small town, marked forever by this act of violence, carries forward the lessons learned and the questions that remain unanswered.